Yeah. So Jeff, I'm gonna do a little intro here. So basically the whole goal is to talk to other podiatrists that are entrepreneurs and that are wanting to think outside of the box in podiatry, whether it be in their practice or on a side hustle, kind of like what this myfootshop.com is. So, okay.
Gotcha.
Hello and welcome to Podiatry Practice Mastery. My name is Don Pelto and I have Dr. Jeff Oster here, and we're going to be talking about his myfootshop.com. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Great to be here,
So
Don.
tell me a little bit. We were talking and I wanted to get it on film here. So tell me a little bit about your story, how you got into developing this online website.
Back in the 1990s, I think there was a lot of frustration in medicine, and anybody who was in practice at that time, we were going through a transition where a lot of our independence was being taken away. And I think we all found different ways to create an outlet for that frustration. Mine turned out to be that in the evenings, I would sit down and write about what I knew about. During the day, I would collect photos and stories. And then in the evenings, pull these stories together into this new thing that was called the internet. I was lucky enough to have a good friend who is the communications director for the AFL-CIO, who was interested in cutting edge technology for communications on the internet. So he helped me build an early prototype of this website that we now call myfootshop.com. Ultimately, the website became an educationally driven website. Contains over 120 different knowledge base articles. And I think we use our knowledge base articles, if we convert to internet language, we use our knowledge base articles as content marketing. So a good example would be, let's say you go to the doctor says you have tarsal tunnel syndrome. You listen to the explanation, it makes no sense. You go out to your car, you get on your phone and you search for tarsal tunnel syndrome, and that's where we connect. And so the educational content, I think, is consumer oriented. We do try to keep it a little technical. You and I, we spend our lives trying to learn technical terms, and then the rest of our lives trying to unbundle those technical terms, into vernacular that our patients can understand. But ultimately, then the knowledge base, we thought, well, how do we go ahead and hook this up to an e-commerce platform? And it was a challenge initially, because I think when you start to sell things on a website, you're really challenged to maintain the validity of the content so that you don't have bias to try to sell products. And I've really struggled with this over the years, but I think the explanation that I've come up with most is, how does a newspaper publisher write an article about, say, a person who's prominent in the community who is buying advertising in their newspaper, but let's say he's also under investigation by the local district attorney's office, right? So you have that internal conflict, and we really stress objectivity and try to eliminate bias, but you also have to pay your way in life. And we chose not to build the platform like WebMD that's just slathered in advertising and difficult to get through, all of their promotions from third parties. Ours is completely free of advertising, but focuses on product sales specific to those conditions. So for instance, if you read one of our articles, let's say about turf toe, there would be products specifically tied for consumers to look at that would be specific to turf toe, like a turf toe plate or a spring plate that they could then purchase. So a lot of what we have is educational content that we find a big driver in our sales are referrals from other doctors. A lot of referrals from physical therapy, from orthopedics. And early on, we were able to cut a niche in the carbon fiber market. I think it was really an interesting opportunity because it stepped out of the realm of podiatry and a little bit into the realm of O&P, to get into carbon fiber.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was a great segue for us, and ultimately, after 20 years in being in business, last year we exited and sold the business to Tedifix, so that Pedifix is now managing it. And it's great because it's great to see them use their resources to build some of the things that we were unable to do. And when I say we, this is a two-man army, my wife and I, and a team of salespeople. And you know how it goes. You practice by day and then you
You're
spend all your off
bootstrapping at
hours.
night. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So have you always been, Jeff, have you always been an entrepreneur? Like, and how did you get into this and how much time did it take you and what were the benefits to you? Was it a pretty substantial, benefit for your practice? Does it supersede your practice itself?
Don, there's so many wonderful problems to solve in the world. It's great. It's great. I had I began to build a electronic health record at one time that never really got off the ground, but it was an interesting project to get started. At another point, I had a survey business called MedServe. We were going to be the good housekeeping seal for medical offices. So we would survey patients. Nobody likes to get surveyed. We learned that. Then I had another business called howmuchdoc.com. And that was almost like a dating service for doctors and patients who didn't have health insurance, but were willing to pay cash. And so the cost of the service was placed front and center by the physician's office. And then that would create the ability for these two to be able to hook up and provide a service. Now, I think each of those are projects that you need to do those and you need to fail before you can have success.
My first podcast membership site was Heal My Foot Wound Fast.
Real cool.
Well, but people with foot wounds are the most non-compliant, poor people around. They didn't pay any, it was just a flop, right. But you have to flop as many times so you can get something that works, right, Jeff?
Right. And they never heal fast, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. I just love the problem solving. I love the, creating opportunities to solve problems. And it's been interesting because I was in private practice for about 30 years. I'm about 36 years into practice now. And now I'm employed in a hospital setting and taking on more and more committee responsibilities. But it's great because the hospital is a small hospital and it allows me now to be an entrepreneur within my hospital, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. So I chair the infection control committee and the antimicrobial stewardship. And it's interesting in these days of COVID to be able to create new ways to manage infections and prevent infections.
Wow. Now tell me a little bit, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm not data driven, but are you data driven based on this site that you produced in terms of what pages are clicking and which aren't and things like that?
There's so many rabbit holes that you can go down and chase, and it's interesting how much of the responses that we see are due to voids in the market. So for instance, if you, I think a good analogy would be if you try to purchase a search term from Google, let's say. So if you purchase, let's say the word bunion, and you try to use pay-per-click advertising based on a search term of bunion, you might end up paying $6 a click.
Yep.
Because of the competition with it. Strangely enough, the two that have been most successful for us are saddle bone deformity, which if you search on the internet, there really isn't a lot of literature and there's not a lot of conversation about saddle bone deformities. And then we got picked up, I forget the discussion forum, but we got picked up by a discussion forum about piezogenic papules, Yeah. So, can you imagine having your claim to fame in life being piezogenic papules?
No.
But traffic was huge, and just off the map. And a lot of times it's these little niche areas that people are looking for so that you can compete, and you need to find that niche somehow within your profession. And within foot and ankle care, there's plenty of those. There's all kinds of little obscure areas that you can go down.
Now, how is it that you guys could leverage yourself in the market? I know you talked about specific niches, but also during Amazon. So if I take turf toe and put it in Amazon, I'm going to get maybe a similar search result, not having the educational component as when I would go to your site. So how do you guys do that now? Is it referrals or is it AdWords, or how do you get people showing up there?
It's a combination of everything, Don, that you need to find. But I think the only argument that you can really use to counter Amazon is brand building. And we did try Amazon for a while. Consultants said, you have to do this, you have to do this. And we used Amazon for about 6 months, and we just found that it diluted our brand. We've had an internal conflict for years. Do we just go exclusively e-commerce and not spend all the time, effort, and energy on knowledge? Or do we create a brand that creates that knowledge? And going back to what I mentioned before about content marketing, I think the knowledge base that we have is uniquely suited to help people answer questions. Now, this isn't going to be for everybody. If you just want a couple of clicks and buy your product and out the door, My Foot Shop probably isn't going to be the right format for you. We developed a program called Medically Guided Shopping. And medically guided shopping really it was created out of a incubator at a previous hospital where I worked. And we had the advantage of using the incubator. Had a real nice fellow who was a MD PhD student who took on our project. And he said, really what you're doing is trying to use medical guidance to help people shop for appropriate products so that there's not a lot of multiple
time.
Right. And, think about, your patients, they go to Walmart and they're, much more willing to spend $13.95 over and over and over again than pay a $35 copay. Right. And so what we tried to do is to create this model that uses both, I guess you could say, the left-hand side of the brain and the right-hand side of the brain. We have graphics that, for instance, you can click on a region of the foot and it would take you to the knowledge base articles that are associated with that particular portion of the foot. So for instance, if you clicked on the plantar heel, you would pick up a series of articles, say Baxter's nerve entrapment, plantar fasciitis, etc.
Yeah, I was looking at your site in preparation, and I love that where you can pick the part and it'll show the articles. And I love the term, and I watched your little intro video when you had more hair about medically guided shopping. And what it sounded like is you had, like, people could look based on their own thing, but if they had a question, they could call and there's a operator and they would just say, hey, I have this, what do you recommend? Is that correct?
That's it. Yeah. So I think it's going to be driven by purchases on our site. I think are going to be driven by people who are willing to take the time to try to understand the problem that they have. And that's not everybody, and I think the other people go to Amazon because they just, they want a quick solution, but many times that solution doesn't translate into something that really legitimately solves their problem.
Well, I think, Jeff, you mentioned everything. How many times do we have patients come in, they say, well, what shoe do I need?
Right.
Like I said, how many shoes have you bought? Well, I bought 10. What shoe do I need? Well, if
Right.
10 haven't got you better, I can't give you the 11th and make you better. It's not a shoe problem. It's
Exactly.
a foot. And so when what you say with this medically guided shopping is you have some different types of things that can help with, let's say, turf toe, but a lot of times they've already spent $200 on every little thing and they won't do a $35 copay. And where do you see, and I know you've probably sold out on this, but where do you see future potential in terms of for entrepreneurs within podiatry? Let's go. So those that are listening, maybe they have their own practice and they want to be more entrepreneurial and have these side hustles. Where do you see the future?
Boy, the direction of medicine that I've seen over the course of my career has been interesting from the standpoint that I think as a profession, we're pretty rapidly moving from solo practice to being integrated into a larger system. Maybe that's a hospital or a group practice. And I don't know where the type of product that we have with My Foot Shop is going to be something that could be duplicated, because it seems like let's say you come out of a 3-year residency, you're just all ready to put calcaneal tibial nails in, and you're raring to go, and you really don't care about selling hammer toe crest pads, right? But I think that there's opportunities that you stumble into. For instance, big trend recently in minimal incision surgery.
Yep.
And I went through the initial minimal incision surgery problems, that we saw in the 70s and 80s, and all it takes is one generation of podiatry folks to think that they rediscovered, a new technique. But I'm seeing better things. For instance, I just did a blog post on my foot shop of minimal incision versus open calcaneal displacement osteotomies. And I think there's some validity for that, to be able to use a burr and visualize with fluoroscopy the displacement osteotomy. Sure, there's pros and cons. I still do mine open. I still appreciate being able to see the amount of displacement. But I think, companies are helping us to evolve in our surgical techniques. For the individual, though, it's a challenge, and you've got to be willing to make a commitment, whether you win or whether you lose, in terms of what you're doing. But you got to commit. You got to be willing to work hard, and you have to have that sense that the goal that I'm reaching for is real and it'll benefit people.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, I think there's a certain people that are going to resonate with this podcast and with what we're talking about. And it's probably going to be the private practitioners. I think the ones that are in groups or in hospitals, I just kind of say they're not hungry enough. They're getting fed patients and they churn them in and out. Whereas I think at a private practice, you're learning how to optimize each one with new technology and shockwave and amnio and all these other types of things, and the crest pads and all these other types of things that you're doing. And I think it really depends on what type of practice you're in. If you really want to have your own practice or work in a group, I think it's going to be different.
Yeah, very much so. So as we see, what I would say the majority of new graduates, they look like they're going into group practices. And I'll tell you honestly, Don, I'm very proud of where our profession has gone. Gosh, we have matured so much. When I came out of school in '83, I had 4 years of education and I had a 1-year residency, but I've learned so much since then.
Yeah.
And I see these young kids coming out, young kids, they're typically late 20s or early 30s by that time. And they have a much more integrated knowledge set of not only just lower extremity health, but also general medicine. It's great to see.
Yeah. Yeah. We work with residents here in Worcester, and they're very well qualified when they come out. Not many of them are interested in practice management, though. And so I think they're going to, I just say, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I am. I think they're really well prepared to be good employees.
That's a good way to put it.
And I think but the problem is with an employee is you're capped. You're probably not going to have multiple practices. You're probably not going to have multiple associates. You're probably, what I'm saying, where the real benefit is that second and third doctor, that second and third location, that new invention that you invented that can help the profession. There are a few people that are kind of industry transformers that invent braces, for example, or invent, other things that can benefit the whole profession. And that's kind of what I like to interview people and talk about, people that have kind of changed things in a profession. Like, what are new things like minimal invasive servant, kind of coming back to that, or other types of, they invented their own shoe or their own course or things like that. So
you bet. Yeah.
It's interesting.
And I think those opportunities, even if you're in group practice and you're employed, I think those opportunities are still there. You just have to have that sense of curiosity and that sense of problem solving and the joy that comes from, wow, that's cool. I did that. That's, that's really made a change in how we do things. And it's really made a whole new set of benefits for the people we care for.
Jeff, one thing I really admire is you're kind of a prolific writer in terms of writing content, blogging. For those that are interested in kind of blogging, I'm a real habit guy. Do you have a certain habit, like you do a draft and you do a final, you do it every Monday, you do an hour a day? Where do you find time in a busy practice to blog so consistently?
Boy, you just got to go off in the corner sometimes and, have a little quiet time.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think you also have to be motivated by the things in the world that you see around you, and then it's interesting because my take on what needs to be on myfootshop.com is more technical than what the new owners with Pedifix believe. And I think there's a mix between the two, because for many consumers, medical language is a difficult thing to wade through. But for instance, some of the blogging that I did about Cartiva implant failures was picked up, over and over again because it was something that people are really looking for. So I think the challenge is finding that blend between what's consumer-oriented information and how technical you can go with it, because I think the technical part of it matters. It differentiates us from family practice or a more general form of medicine. We're a subspecialty with a very unique set of skills.
Good. Well, Jeff, I think we covered a lot of good topics here, and I appreciate your time and your expertise in handling this. If you want to learn more about myfootshop.com, that's where it's at. So I think there's the knowledge base. Anywhere else that you'd send people to?
No, I think we tried to have that conversation on multiple levels with the people that interact with my foot shop. Like you mentioned, we have a sales support team. Chat is always an opportunity, and we talk to people from all over the world, Don. It's really wonderful. It's neat to see, how healthcare is provided throughout the world.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate doing this interview.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.